Hey bookmarks and bookworms, welcome back to the channel. I am celebrating Victober 2024 today by ranking every Thomas Hardy novel by their opening lines. I will leave in the description the creators of Victober so you can go and follow along with all of their announcements for this year's celebration. But without further ado, let's get into talking about the books by Thomas Hardy that I have read and enjoyed so far. Now, I have read 3 Thomas Hardy novels and absolutely loved them. They were The Mayor of Casterbridge, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and Far from the Madding Crowd. And I have picked up and put down again very early on because I just wasn't really gelling with them. Jude the Obscure and Return of the Native. Now, whether they are books that I can return to with a different, when I'm just in a different mood and love them, who knows, because they are very well-known books by him. Not like the kind of more the more obscure titles by him that we will be going through today. So before I read the opening line of each book, I will tell you kind of a little bit about the general theme and direction of each book in case they're new to you. So the first one is Desperate Remedies. Now, this was published in 1871 and is a thrilling tale of mystery and intrigue revolving around a young woman's pursuit of happiness. So the first line of this is, in the long and intricately inwrought chain of circumstance which renders worthy of record some experiences of Cytherea Grey, Edward Springrove and others, the first event directly influencing the issue was a Christmas visit. Okay, not a lot to go off there other than that we're opening up around a Christmas visit, so that in itself is a very magical time, and so yeah, whether there's going to be a romance, presumably there is going to be a romance because we're dealing with a young woman and it's about happiness, and that generally more often than not involves love of some kind. So let's go on to the next one now that we have that first line in the bag. The next novel is Under the Greenwood Tree. This was first published in 1872, so I am going in published date order for these titles. And this is about a gentle romance between a school teacher and a church organist in a quaint rural village. So that just sounds wonderful, and again we're opening up here during winter time. The first line of this says, to dwellers in a wood, almost every species of tree has its voice as well as its feature. Okay, instantly that is higher than Desperate Remedies, so we're going to put Desperate Remedies on the bottom, unfortunately, and Under a Greenwood Tree is now in first place. Okay, next up we have A Pair of Blue Eyes, which again was published in 1872. He was really on a roll in 1872. A Pair of Blue Eyes is about a love triangle set against the backdrop of Hardy's Wessex, exploring themes of class and social mobility. And the first line reads, Elfride Swancourt was a girl whose emotions lay very near the surface. Their nature, more precisely and as modified by the creeping hours of time, was known only to those who watched the circumstances of her history. Again, I'm not massively intrigued by that opening first line, so it's going to go Under a Greenwood Tree. I'm also going to put it under Desperate Remedies as well, actually, because I do like a Christmassy setting, and so Desperate Remedies kind of opens with that, and so for that reason alone, A Pair of Blue Eyes is going at the bottom. Moving on to one of my favourite Hardy novels ever, this is Far from the Madding Crowd. This is first published in 1874. This is a tale of rural life and romantic entanglements, featuring the fiercely independent Bathsheba Everdene and her 3 suitors. So just the perfect setup. And the first line of this is, when Farmer Oak smiled, the corners of his mouth spread till they were within an unimportant distance of his ears. His eyes were reduced to chinks, and diverging wrinkles appeared around them, extending upon his countenance like the rays in a rudimentary sketch of the rising sun. Okay, that's first place. I mean, Gabriel Oak is one of my all-time favourite literary characters, and probably the one that I love the most in terms of, like, I was to put myself into a novel, I would marry Gabriel Oak. That's just... And so that is obviously going first on the list. As great as Under the Greenwood Tree's opening line was, it cannot compete with such a soulful kind of opening line as that. So Far from the Madding Crowd has rocketed into first place. Next up, first published in 1876, is The Hand of Ethelberta, and this is a social comedy about a woman who manipulates social conventions in order to secure a better life for herself and her family. And the first line reads, "Young Mrs. Petherwin stepped from the door of an old and well-appointed inn in a Wessex town to take a country walk." Let me read the second line. "By her look and carriage she appeared to belong to that gentle order of society which has no worldly sorrow except when its jewellery gets stolen. But as a fact not generally known, her claim to distinction was rather one of brains than of blood." Okay, so that line is setting up perfectly what we know from the blurb. So it's doing what it says on the tin rather than me being intrigued by the opening line itself, if that makes sense. It's set up the premise that we have a woman who is not by blood but by brain. So yeah, that is appealing in a sense. Actually, I do love reading about, I guess you would call that feminist, right? You have a woman who is elevating herself in society through her brains rather than through who she's going to marry. So that in itself appeals to me. So I'm going to put that above Under the Greenwood Tree, but below Far from the Madding Crowd. So The Hand of Ethelberta is actually second place right now in terms of that opening, because I like the premise and the opening line kind of defines that. So let's go on to the next one. Now, next up is one of the ones that I previously picked up and put down. This is Return of the Native, published in 1878. This is about a story of love and obsession set on the rugged landscapes of Egdon Heath. Now, the first line of this is, "Along the road walked an old man." Now, that is a very short opening line, so maybe I should read the second line as well. "He was white-headed as a mountain, bowed in the shoulders and faded in general aspect. He wore a glazed hat, an ancient boat cloak and shoes, his brass buttons bearing an anchor upon their face." This is not getting interesting. Again, very similarly to Far from the Madding Crowd, we're opening the novel with a description of the main character, the main male character. So that is interesting, but this is not interesting to me. So I'm going to put this below Under the Greenwood Tree and actually below Desperate Remedies, because we have that young woman in Desperate Remedies that I like the premise of. So let's move The Return of the Native down, which puts it in second to last place. It's not as far down as A Pair of Blue Eyes, but Return of the Native is going second to last place. Next up, we have The Trumpet Major. This is first published in 1879, and this is a historical romance set during the Napoleonic Wars, focusing on the lives of three people affected by love and war. So the first line of this says, "In the days of high-waisted and muslin-gowned women, when the vast amount of soldiering going on in the country was a cause of much trembling to the sex, there lived in a village near the Wessex coast 2 ladies of good report, though unfortunately of limited means. The elder was a Mrs. Martha Garland, a landscape painter's widow, and the other was her only daughter Anne." Okay, that's intriguing. I already love a historical war setting. There is going to be love involved, and presumably this woman living alone with her daughter. They're on the coast. I mean, the Napoleonic Wars were fought in ships largely, and going to sea. So they're on the coast. Is there going to be some sailors and whatnot for this kind of growing up daughter Anne? Who knows? So I'm interested in that. That is going quite high. That's going to rank quite highly. I think that's going to rank higher than The Hand of Ethelberta, but obviously below Far from the Madding Crowd. So let's put that in. That's going to go in second place right now, because I think that was quite intriguing. Next up, we have The Mayor of Casterbridge. So we're into the final 5 novels left to be ranked on this list. The Mayor of Casterbridge was first published in 1884, and the first line is, I should say what it's about, shouldn't I? So this one is about a man's rise and fall, pretty hard rise and fall, as a mayor, and his attempts to atone for his past mistakes, It involves his daughter, and it's set in a village, and it's great. It's a really, really great one. I loved that one when I read it. But this is its opening line. So, one evening of late summer before the 19th century had finished, 1/3 of its span, a young man and woman, the latter carrying a child, were approaching the large village of Weydon Priors in Upper Wessex on foot. They were plainly but not ill-clad, though the thick hoar of dust which had accumulated on their shoes and garments from an obviously long journey lent a disadvantageous shabbiness to their appearance just now. Just that opening line alone, I am transported back into this novel. I know where we're going, I know what happens to the baby, and the woman, and just I'm there, I'm in it. This is such a great novel, and I'm in that village. I'm in this kind of fair that they end up in the beginning, and yeah, I think this has to probably go first, just because I'm just there. So I think actually the Mayor of Casterbridge, that opening line, and how impactful a start this book has, that's going to go in first place for me. So that takes us down to the final four, the first of which is The Woodlanders. Published in 1886, The Woodlanders is an exploration of love and class through the lives of woodland dwellers and their intertwined fates. So the first line of this is: the rambler who, for old association or other reasons, should trace the forsaken coach road running almost in a meridional line from Bristol to the south shore of England, would find himself during the latter half of his journey in the vicinity of some extensive woodlands interspersed with apple orchards. Okay, not overly persuasive in terms of wanting to pick this up immediately. So I feel like The Woodlanders will rank quite low on this list. Potentially, where will it go? It'll be near the bottom, so I would say it's going to go above Return of the Native, below Desperate Remedies. Okay, final three. Tess of the D'Urbervilles, first published in 1891. This is going to be a hard one to place, I feel, because this is one of my favourites. A tragic story of a young woman's struggle with social expectations and personal misfortune. And the opening line of this is: the village of Marlott lay amid the northeastern undulations of the beautiful vale of Blakemore or Blackmore, aforesaid, an engirdled and secluded region, for the most part untrodden as yet by tourist or landscape painter, though within a 4 hours' journey from London. It is a vale whose acquaintance is best made by viewing it from the summits of the hills that surround it, except perhaps during the droughts of summer. An unguided ramble in its recesses in bad weather is apt to engender dissatisfaction with its narrow, tortuous and miry ways. Now, I read the first paragraph because I got a bit swept away there. That actually is not as compelling as I thought it would be as an opening. I have to put this below Casterbridge and also below Far from the Madding Crowd, and actually also below The Trumpet Major, below The Hand of Ethelberta, not below Under the Greenwood Tree. I think it's going to be in between those two. It's going to be in between Ethelberta and The Greenwood Tree, but that in itself doesn't capture my attention as much as the others above it have. So let's put that on the list, despite it being absolutely magnificent, and you should all read it if you haven't already, but I'm sure you have read it. It's just such a classic, and I feel like everyone's read it. But if you're looking for a Victober read, Tess of the D'Urbervilles would be my recommendation for you. Let's go to Jude the Obscure, the penultimate one we have to rank. This was first published in 1895 and is a profound critique of social institutions and marriage through the life of a disillusioned stonemason. So the first, and I'm pretty sure this is quite bleak because Scott had this for his Misery May project last year, I think. I think he had Jude the Obscure for that, and I think that's when I picked this up and then put it down again. So this is another one where I didn't quite get into this one. The opening line of this is: the schoolmaster was leaving the village and everybody seemed sorry. Okay. I remember this, and it's just not that. I am biased because I have put it down once before, but that just is not overly. Let's give it a second line, shall we? So second line: the miller at Crescombe sent him the small white tilted cart and horse to carry his goods to the city of destination, about 20 miles off, such a vehicle proving of quite sufficient size for the departing teacher's effects. Okay, so it's not quite the lowest, but it's quite low. So let's say that it will go above The Return of the Native, because that was quite a boring opening, wasn't it? But not as good as The Woodlanders. Yeah. And that takes us on to our final one. Right, so we're on to The Well Beloved, and this is published in 1897. So this could be one of Hardy's last works. This should be his last novel, if I've done my research well. And the opening line of this is, "A person who differed from the local wayfarers was climbing the steep road which leads through the sea-skirted townlet definable as the Street of Wells and forms a pass into that Gibraltar of Wessex, the singular peninsula once an island and still called such, that stretches out like the head of a bird into the English Channel. It is connected with the mainland by a long, thin neck of pebbles, cast up by rages of the sea and unparalleled in its kind in Europe." Okay, I have no idea what that is going to be about, but there is a person, undefined, climbing a steep road in a seaside town. So apparently, oh, I should have said as well, The Well Beloved is a story of obsessive love and the pursuit of ideal beauty, focusing on a man's quest for the perfect woman. This actually, I think, is quite intriguing. So I think this is going to feature quite highly. Not hugely highly. I think it's going to go below Desperate Remedies but above The Woodlanders. So that puts it in 8th place overall. So if you've been paying attention, you will now know that A Pair of Blue Eyes is in last place, followed by Return of the Native in 11th, Jude the Obscure, The Woodlanders, The Well Beloved, Desperate Remedies, Under the Greenwood Tree in 6th, 5th is Tess of the D'Urbervilles, then The Hand of Elfberta, then The Trumpet Major, and then the final top 2 being Far from the Madding Crowd and The Mayor of Casterbridge. So now let's get into the crux of the matter. Why have I done this video? What's the point of it? It is to say that for Victober, to celebrate Victober, I am running an additional Victober book club where we are going to read The Trumpet Major by Thomas Hardy. Why The Trumpet Major? Well, it featured highly on that list of opening lines, and I went on to sample this novel, and it is just filling me with such joy and enthusiasm to read this novel. It's one of his lighter novels. It feels very reminiscent of Far from the Madding Crowd in that it's set around a young woman who has 3 men vying for her attention and for her hand, one of whom I believe, or at least one of whom is a sailor slash soldier who has been kind of swept up in the Napoleonic Wars. And so this all feels very much like a protagonist who feels like Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and that she's a strong, works the land, young, kind of naive, innocent woman who, yeah, is kind of coming into adulthood and has these suitors, and so it blends. It feels like a really nice blend between Tess and Far from the Madding Crowd, and as they are 2 of my favourite Thomas Hardy novels, this feels like a match made in heaven, that The Trumpet Major should be my next Thomas Hardy novel. I would love for you to join me, so if you click on my Patreon link, you will see that for October I have changed my first tier to not only be 2 extra videos a month, but also plus Victober. So if you join that tier, you will get sent the Victober book club sign up link. So yes, join along for the discussion and yeah, to celebrate Victober. If you are a member over on my Ko-fi page, the link has already been posted on the members only feed, so you'll be able to join if you wish. So all that's left for me to do is to wish you all a happy Victober. Do let me know down in the comments what you're reading for Victober. Leave your TBRs for me. Leave me your favourite Thomas Hardy novels in the comments below. Do you agree with my opening lines? Which one sounded the most intriguing to you? And I shall see you very soon in my next video, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.